Okay, and that brings us to Beloved's chapter, which, the question I asked about Beloved's chapter was for you to make sense of it. A lot of people ask questions about it, and so I'm going to actually open up the book to kind of go through this one. The first thing you notice, of course, is the lack of punctuation. Like midway through the first paragraph, she asks, "How can I say things that are pictures?" Right, and so what we're getting then is imagery. These are the pictures, the things that she's seen put into words, right? And it brings up questions about language. Questions about things like naming. The power that comes in language, the power that comes in naming, and whose language it is. When we think about slavery, right? People were stolen, kidnapped out of Africa, brought to America, and made to learn English, right? And so that language is not their ancestral language. It's a language that symbolizes in some ways the trauma. And so how to take this language that is, the language from the people who caused the trauma, to use it to communicate what she sees, right? And so we have all of these images, and we have these things that are references to things that do happen in the book, but a lot of things that don't happen to Beloved, and so that's a strange thing. People asked about the hot thing, and I take the hot thing as an intense emotion. This longing that she has, the wanting to be loved, the wanting to love. The first time Beloved says a hot thing, it's immediately after she says, "Her face is my own, and I want to be there in the place where her face is, and to be looking at it too," right? And so we get that. One of the things that she says, this is the second paragraph, "All of it is now, it is always now. There will never be a time when I'm not crouching and watching others who are crouching too." I know some of you have suggested that time is not real, but here we have the idea that everything that has happened is happening still, which I think speaks to the effects of history, that it's never just history, it's never behind, but it continually affects us. Which brings us to everything that she talks about. People asked about the men without skin. I think those are white people, which is a really interesting thing. Not to go too philosophically dorky on you here, but there's coming out of post-structuralism, the idea that we think in binarisms, and that we speak in binarisms, which is either this or this. And a lot of times what happens is we take the privileged member of that binary opposition and we define one through the other. So, we see this, it used to be people would refer to white and non-white people. And so what would happen is you have the white that is privileged and the non-white who's defined in the other way. And one of the ways we fight against this is to flip that. And we see that with the term people of color, because it suggests that the other one, the other, is white people, and there are people of no color. And so we see how that definition changes the way we think about it. And so I say the people without skin suggests that the opposite of that, the people with skin are the important people, and the people without skin are we know white people, but we know that they're also the oppressors here. So we see a lot of this imagery is of a slave ship, in the middle passage, and it talks about her being crowded. Talks about the awful things that happen there with dead people and people who are alive who are cramped together, rats being there, the white people urinating on them, the moldy bread, right, bread the color of sea. people going over the edge. There are references to sharks in there. Right, and all of those things when we say, well, beloved, the baby never experienced this. So why is she talking about that? I think the interesting thing is that we do know of two characters specifically who did experience it, at least two, maybe three. One is Setha's own mother, the other is Sixo. And I can't help but think that when Beloved says all of it is now, it is always now, she talks about not just her experience, but others' experiences as well, and they kind of come together in this. And that's, I think that's kind of what's going on. Other things, people talked about the clouds, right? The noisy clouds. I think those are well, I know that's reference to Gunsmoke. And somebody asked about there's reference to gunshots when Setha is in with Mrs. Garner. Because I don't know what else it would be, I assume that is Paul A being shot. We know Paul D later on, in a later video, I'll talk about this, talks about his brother being gone, Paul A. Not Paul F was sold, Paul A was gone because a school teacher talks about losing two of the slaves, one being Sixo. Paul A must be the other one. So I think that's what's going on there. Other things in this part, the wanting to smile. Somebody brought up the being the laugher. So it says she is the laugh and I am the laugher. I'm not exactly sure what that means. And then I hear chewing and swallowing and laughter. It belongs to me. She is the laugh. I am the laugher. The only other time we really talk about laughing is Sixo in the next chapter, or the next two chapters from now, when Sixo dies and he finally laughs. And it's because he has had a child, or he got the 30-mile woman is pregnant with his child, and that child is going to live on. It's all I have, really. Maybe the connection there. Someone asked about the river, right? And the river is a common image in like the present life and the afterlife. It's often separated by a river, right? The river Styx, and other mythologies have a river to separate the life and the afterlife. And so it's possible that in this here we see the joining of many different experiences here, which leads us to the need to make an interpretation about Beloved. And personally, I take her as a manifestation of things that have been taken, and taken from people, right? And so when we see Denver, right, Denver sees her as her sister, right? Her sister was taken from her. Setha sees her as the things that are taken from her, which is her daughter, but, as we go on, I think we see the fact that perhaps it's her mother too. Oh, somebody talked about, Setha talks about her mother and her mother being killed, and never says why, and doesn't really know why. I think it's pretty obvious that her mother was running away, and that her mother was running away and abandoning her in doing so, but Setha doesn't seem to want to admit that. So what's something else that was taken from her? Setha's mother was taken from her. And we'll see Beloved become more mother-like later on. She grows big and pregnant, as Setha seems to diminish away. Um, for Paul D, then she's represented all of the people who have been taken from him, and even the idea of his manhood, his identity being taken from him with the whole red heart thing. And she talks about things that certainly could represent his experience, the gun smoke, and that, as well as Setha's mother's experience with the iron collar and how that would affect her. So, personally, I take her as something much bigger, and the trauma and what's been taken from people here. All right, and then finally, the last chapter. There's a lot of what each one wants, and Beloved wants to be with Setha, and Denver wants to be able to protect. Setha wants Beloved back, but she also seems to want a clear conscience. She wants maybe some sort of forgiveness. Murphy said they all want what was taken from them. Hadley recognized that Denver seems to want to banish the past. And Liz said that Beloved seems to want some sort of payment, which is a really interesting thing as well. But they all kind of want each other. They don't necessarily seem to want all three of them together. Maybe Setha does, but that's not what the other two are looking for. The thing that is ironic to me is that it's all about possession, and this is a book about slavery, and raises the question of possession and the possession we have over other people, so how do we I don't know if draw the line's the right word, but how do we look at possession as in a child, this is my son, and possession as in slavery, and can you love someone so much that it becomes problematic, and that's just something to continue to think about. Anyway, that's all I got. I know I ran through that surprisingly pretty quickly, but I will see you later.